In The Curious Case of Benjamin Button that came out in 2008, Benjamin spends his whole life moving backward physically while he's moving forward emotionally. So he's chronologically aging, but his body is going backwards in time. And eventually that contradiction destroys the life he wants most.
What makes Benjamin Button devastating is that Benjamin already knows how his story ends long before his love interest Daisy does. He understands that eventually she won't be living with a man, she'll be raising a child again.
The Curious Case of Benjamin Button asks a brutal question. If you know the person you loved would eventually have to take care of you just like a child, would you stay or would you leave?
That is what happens in regular life sometimes.
Yeah.
You just don't know which one it may be.
Yeah.
If that's the case.
Or who you might need to take care of you or for how long, None of us really know what our fate might be, but I guess we can all hope that somebody would want to take care of us in the end. But that's something that you hear commonly, is that people don't want to burden their loved ones with their care, not just to check on me, but if you need full personal care, then that's a completely different thing. And certainly if anybody's ever been through being a caregiver or seen somebody go through it, that is a more than full-time job. If that person is complete care, one person can't even do it alone by themselves, So this movie was directed by David Fincher and it was written by Eric Roth. And so it did win awards at the 81st Academy Awards. The Curious Case of Benjamin, I don't know why I always want to say Benjamin Buttons.
Because you black.
Received, it got 13 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Brad Pitt, Best Supporting Actress for Taraji P. Henson, and it won 3 of them for Best Art Direction, Best Makeup, and Best Visual Effects. And so the cast consists of Brad Pitt as Benjamin Button, Cate Blanchett as Daisy Fuller, Taraji P. Henson as Queenie, and Julia Ormond as Caroline Button. And so David Fincher directed the film as this kind of deeply emotional meditation on time and loss and aging and relationships. And so though the premise is kind of fantastical, somebody aging backwards, the emotional core is grounded in these recognizable fears about dependency and caregiving and mortality. And so the film explores this idea that love is often shaped and damaged by timing. And Benjamin and Daisy can never fully exist in sync with each other because they're physically moving in these opposite directions through life. One is aging normally, getting older. The other one is aging backward. And they only have this really small window of time where they're kind of both in the same place at the same time and sort of the same age, right? And so Benjamin's decision to leave at the end of the movie becomes one of the film's most emotionally debated moments because it forces audience to answer this question. Was the leaving an act of love? Was it fear disguised as sacrifice? Why did he leave? And was leaving the right thing to do?
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation via Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. The executive producer of this video is your boy Brian, who requested this film through Axiom Amnesia's Deep Dive on Demand program that we'll tell you more about later. So let's just get right to a summary of the film. If you haven't guessed it by now, we are going to spoil The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And so this movie is broken into 3 acts like most films are. And so let's call this first act where he's born backward, right? So it's 1918 New Orleans, and Benjamin Button is born with the appearance and illness of an elderly man. And his mother dies during childbirth, and his father is horrified by this and by his appearance as an old man, even though he's a baby. And he abandons him at a nursing home where his caregiver, Queenie, that's the one played by Taraji P. Henson, raises him as her own son, which is also sort of interesting in 1918 New Orleans, where she's raising a white baby as her own son and she's a black woman. But maybe in New Orleans, it's the most possible because you had a lot of people of color who were white presenting, and so maybe it works the best in New Orleans at that time in American history. But anyway, Benjamin grows chronologically older, but his body is aging in reverse. So he starts out as this old man and he starts getting younger as far as his appearance is concerned. So as Benjamin grows younger and healthier, while he's surrounded by these elderly residents in this nursing home, the nursing home is actually in an actual house, though. It's not like a regular nursing home facility. And so during childhood, he meets Daisy Fuller, who is this young girl who's visiting her grandmother at the nursing home. And the two form this immediate emotional connection. And it's like you realize when he meets the little girl, kind of, because he's a little boy, he meets the little girl, but you're like, yeah, this is going to be problems because you look like an old man, even though you're a little boy. And here's a little girl, and it seems weird and sort of creepy. Right. And there is even this point in the film where they're caught playing together and the older people really, Queenie understands that he's a child, but other people don't fully understand that. You look like this sort of smaller old man and nobody wants to see a real old man playing with, like a 6-year-old girl because it looks really odd. But he's not an elderly man. He's a child, too, just her same age. Right. So in Act 2 of the film, time pulls them apart. So as Benjamin matures physically, going backward, he works aboard a tugboat, he travels the world, and then Daisy is pursuing ballet. She always wanted to be a dancer, so she's pursuing ballet in New York. And then their lives repeatedly intersect and separate over these, decades as the timing keeps them emotionally connected, but they are physically misaligned, right? So Benjamin experiences war and heartbreak and loss. You think about what's happening after 1918 as he's getting older. We got world wars and all sorts of other things going on. While Daisy's dance career ends after this devastating accident in Paris. So eventually, when their physical ages finally do align in the early 1960s, they look, Benjamin is looking his age or close to it. She's looking her age, and they come together in the 1960s. They reunite and they start this romantic relationship. Let me just hop in here and let you guys know that many of you already know, but changes on this platform have pushed us toward a more viewer-funded model. So if you'd like to help to keep the channel going, there are a few ways that you can support us. You can become a member and unlock over 100 exclusive videos plus additional member perks. You can become an executive producer just like your boy Brian did on this video, or a co-executive producer on an upcoming video through the Deep Dive on Demand, starting at just $10, which gets your name on screen and a shout out during the video. Or you can pick some merch to represent the community. And don't forget to join our mailing list so you never miss a video across all of our channels. And if you're looking for something to watch after this video, be sure to check out our bedtime binge playlist that is linked below. It's full of videos that you might have missed. And you'll find links to all of these options in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. And thank you for helping to keep these deep dives coming. And so after Queenie has passed on, they move in together and they build this peaceful life, together that they never were afforded before because they didn't look the same age, even though deep inside they really were. And so Act 3 is the fear of becoming a child again, right? So when Daisy becomes pregnant and gives birth to their daughter, because she gets pregnant in her 40s and gives birth to their daughter, Caroline, Benjamin realizes that his condition will eventually turn him physically into a child because, he's aging backward, so he's going to go all the way back into infancy, the same way as you are born in the world as an infant. That's the direction Benjamin's going into. And Daisy's going to continue to age normally. And so he's terrified that one day Daisy's going to be burdened with raising both their actual daughter and this husband who's regressing into dependency. So Benjamin sells all his assets and he leaves his money to them and he disappears. And years later, he briefly returns as a physically young man before he continues his decline backward into adolescent childhood and infancy. And in the end, basically, Benjamin has lost his mental faculties, but he is a child at this point, and they eventually track him back to the nursing home, and he's able to connect with Daisy, where Daisy decides, hey, I'm going to take care of, she would have always taken care of Benjamin, but she says, I'm going to take care of Benjamin in that nursing home. And so he slowly loses his memory and his identity and everything, and he eventually dies in her arms as an infant. And that's kind of how he goes out. Now, it's tough because in the process of all this, once Benjamin leaves Daisy, Daisy goes on to get married. So, you know, she goes on to get married to somebody else and she's with that guy and, you know, all of that happens. But that's really the end of the story. And it's kind of sad. Now, the other part of the story that I didn't go into great detail about, but it's couched as a kind of like a flashback. We're looking back because in the beginning, we see Daisy as an elderly woman with her daughter Caroline, and she's basically telling her daughter that, hey, look, the guy you think is your daddy ain't your daddy. This is your daddy, you know. And she tells the story of Benjamin Button and what happened with him. And so there's also this other situation where there's a clock, where the clock is, you know, moving in reverse. Well, we kind of get this backstory of Benjamin and this clock that's going backwards, kind of to represent aging in reverse and stuff. And, you know, so there's just a whole bunch that happens. But that's really the core story, is this story of love between two people for whom the timing is bad. And then this kind of fantastical thing of aging in reverse happens, you know. So let's just get to it. Was Benjamin leaving an act of love, or was it sacrifice? Like, how do we interpret that? Was it the right thing for him to leave?
I don't know. Probably not, I guess, right? It's just, what is the cause for the other person? Just this sense of abandonment too.
Yeah.
So I think that it just has to be that way, that it's abandonment for that person. And people like to, you know, use those sorts of ideas. Oh, I did it because I didn't want you to feel this way, but you are basically trying to decide for the person too.
And Daisy always said she understood that that's what it would mean for her, right? She understood. She went into it like getting the fact that, yeah.
That's what I said in the beginning, right? So when you get with somebody and, you know, nowadays it's not popular to have a significant other for a lifetime, but back in the day, people would get with each other, and then with the realization that later on in life, one of them may need to take care of the other, but that's what you do when you love someone, just like you would do it for your parents. You have the understanding that that's going to happen. What if your parent just left and said, all right, I'm gonna holler at you because I don't want you to take care of me?
Right.
You know, it's basically the same sort of a thing.
And it's rare that parents actually do that, you know, where they're just like, I'm about to bounce, you know. Now, what I do think parents might do is conceal how much help they need, conceal, you know, their decline. But I also think that's cloaked and wrapped up in more than just not wanting to burden other people. Because I think with the natural process of aging and ultimately eventually passing on, that there's the process mentally that every person has to go through to kind of come to an acceptance of that. And you know, if you have older people in your family, have seen them go through this, and everybody's process is not going to be the same.
Yeah.
You see them kind of fight that. They have to come to terms with themselves, the loss of autonomy, the loss of control and power over their lives, and all of these different things going on. So it's more than just the way it affects the other people who might have to pitch in and help.
Yeah, it comes down to a lot of times the denial that the decline is happening, right? And then you have pride too as well, because you build up all this pride over decades, and then later on you're like, well, you know, I don't want to have to ask anyone to help me, right? Or if someone helps me, then that shows some deficiency in me myself, right? But this movie somewhat breaks apart that, in a sense, of the mind and the body. How like the body is separate from the mind, except in the end, you don't necessarily know the separation between the mind and the brain, right? Because in the sense of the memories that you lose as a child, or the memories that you lose as, you know, you get older too. Well, the memories that you had, that we all suffer from childhood memory loss, right? Where we don't remember the things past a certain age. Yeah.
Before a certain age, you mean? Yeah. So and that's really what happens at the end for Benjamin, right? I mean, an infant, the memory of an infant. So even as he's devolving into infancy, that's his brain is doing that, but then his body is also doing that too, because beneath the surface, his body is old. Yeah. Even though it looks like an infant.
And so is his mind, right? So his mind has developed, and, you know, all the emotions and those parts that we attribute to, there's, I guess, sort of a metaphysical, spiritual type of a thing, consciousness and soul and that sort of realm, right? Versus, the physical memories, the things that hold those connections from the past.
Yeah. And what was also sort of sad to me was, it was sad how he died in the end. But what I appreciated was like Queenie, her character, and how she found this baby on the steps, and the baby wasn't pretty, and because he was quote unquote an ugly baby, right? Because he looked like an elderly man. And nobody wanted this baby, but she wanted the baby. And at this point, she didn't have children, and she had, she was basically a childless mother, right? Somebody who was ready to mother and didn't have a baby. And what I think was amazing about this, because she does go on to have a child or children. Yeah. But at this point in her life, she's like, I want a baby. And so that is really why she decided to take on this baby. Because imagine, she's taking care of all these people. Oh, I just wanted to remind you guys that if you're not a member on Axiom.app, Patreon, or YouTube, you're missing out on over 100 exclusive members-only videos, plus other perks like early access to some videos, your name listed as a contributor in the videos, and more. So join today for as little as $5 a month. It's a great way to support the channel. The link's in the description.
So way back when I was in high school, I did a paper on this genetic disorder called progeria.
Oh, yeah.
It's where, the kids, they age very rapidly. So when they're little kids, young toddlers and stuff, then they look much older and their body physically age older. And that's what I think of when, especially at the beginning of the movie, when he's young.
And it reminds you of that too, because and I remember progeria because back in the 80s, they would have children who had progeria on like Maury Povich and, all of these daytime talk shows. It was very much, when you look back at the level of exploitation that was on daytime talk shows back in the day, like it would totally be unacceptable in 2026. But back then it was, showcase. But we did learn about obscure diseases and other conditions and situations that we probably would not have learned about otherwise. But, of course, by 80s standards, it made good TV. So, let's showcase people in their lives and what they're going through. And I think, it's funny because she didn't care what her man, her husband, what he thought, because she brought that baby right on up in there and was laying that baby in the bed with them. He was like, you can't keep this baby. You better call the people, and she knew from the beginning. She was like, oh, this is my baby. I'm keeping this baby.
Yeah. So it makes you think of the whole idea of unconditional love, right? Because she just wants this human life, I guess you could say once.
Yeah.
And she cares for him. And then you get the same thing with the wife, Daisy, as well. So it does remind me of recently there's this this YouTube couple who found out that their child had Down syndrome, the fetus, right? And then they decided to terminate and put it all online. That's another thing. But yeah, and this idea that where is the so-called line on unconditional love? Because, a lot of people may call it ableist and stuff like that, but if you know ahead of time and you see what they face, what they could face, what Benjamin Button faced, you know what I'm saying? That's a very different than, Queenie's position as he's here. But the parents in that case decided, I don't want to have to deal with this kid. So there was no idea of this unconditional love or this connection of unconditional love in that sense, but Queenie displayed it.
Well, I think it's one of those things where it's easy to judge people when you haven't been through the situation. So I think it's easy to judge people and say, I would never, do whatever the decision is, right? But there are people who go, I see what the suffering the child would have. Then there are people who say that it's not my decision to determine life and when life begins and all of that, because it's a very complex issue, and it's not my decision to stop life if life has begun. And depending on when you think that is, what you think is merciful, what it sort of even gets into the conversation about like euthanasia, right? How much suffering is enough for an individual. And we see a lot of suffering in the human condition with illnesses and stuff like that,
Right.
But the decision about what a person might do, if you think about Queenie, who is this childless mother, because she's ready to do it and she doesn't have children to give that to, then it wouldn't have mattered what this kid looked like. You know what I'm saying? She was primed to be the one to say, I don't care if you ugly. I don't care if nobody else wants you. I'm going to be your mama, right? Versus somebody else who may not have had that longing and that experience because either they had other children or they just said, look, I'm going to try again. It ain't going to be this. You think about the father who abandoned him. He abandoned him because he was like, first of all, back at that point, the man wasn't the primary caregiver of the child anyway, although maternal mortality was, pretty high back in the day. They usually aren't the primary caregivers. And he was rich anyway, so he would have had somebody taking care of the kid. And now you don't have the wife, and you're quote unquote stuck with the child who has this major illness, who has been predicted to die anyway, right? Because in the beginning, when the doctors are looking at this baby, they're like, this baby ain't gonna make it, because they don't know he's aging backwards. So yeah, but it's a tough thing to say. But back to the thing about the YouTube couple who, they got so much hate. I mean, it was like brutal.
Right. And it always comes down to, when does life begin, right? And I think of JD Vance, he kind of went viral for this post where he says, happy anniversary to our lovely second lady. 12 years and almost 4 kids later, and we're still going strong. So then everybody shared it and talking about how he believes that it's not a child until
but
actual
yet
birth.
The stance of your
of the policies and politics
is very much like, life begins at conception. But you got to make it right. If you're going to be in the public eye, everything has to be congruent, and it's just not, and it's so ridiculous. Like when you just look at one of the films we're going to be covering soon is Idiocracy. And really, I think in 2026, we are just full on in Idiocracy. There's another thing where they kind of poke fun at. Queenie is very religious. And there's this point where she goes to they had like a tent revival, or they're having church in tent. And, she's praying for Benjamin to be healed and be able to walk. Because, in the beginning, he's in a wheelchair. He basically in the beginning is like these elderly people who are in the nursing home that she runs. And she's like, hopefully he'll be able to walk and stuff. And so he goes up, and then he, the preacher is slaying folks in the spirit. And what's crazy is that after Benjamin is able to walk, take a couple steps or whatever, next thing we know, the preacher just drops dead in the middle of the sermon. It's just like, or right at the end after he has supposedly healed, or his hands have been the hands that have been laid upon to, have the power of God heal this child. And what's weird is how nobody really questioned that he was aging backwards and getting better.
What was his physical age, though? That's what's in the movie that kind of iffy, right? Because if he lived to 85, then the way they showed him, I guess because he's I don't know, because he's small as a baby. It's just kind of confusing, because if someone is progressing backwards, then you would have to set a limit on what that start is, right? And if it's 85 years, I'm just going to guess it's 85 years. And is that congruent with whatever normal course of disease and aging someone that he would have otherwise had he gone chronologically towards the age of 85?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Yeah, because I don't know what he's like at that time, maybe 10, because he was having mobility issues, right? So if he's 85 and he's age 10, that would be around 75, where he really had terrible mobility issues.
And that can happen by that age, even before that age,
And then the time you were in, right, would paint it. So if the movie comes out in 2008, then we look at the age of 85 way different than somebody in...
It looks at 85 in
1918. So then the person who conceives of it at that time and what the life expectancy was at that time would be different too, and the modern medicine. So someone who is, I don't know, 35 years older than what, great healthy life, or, you know what I'm saying? Or 20, 30 years over, then you're really how we would look at someone who's probably 115, 110.
Yeah. Because I mean, that's really kind of what it boils down to. It's sort of like this concept that I saw, and it happens when you look at pictures of people and look at people from times gone by, where you realize that like you're probably older maybe than Archie Bunker was, but Archie Bunker felt so old. And how much of this is that were they actually older? There is a scientific argument that technically, even though you're the same chronological age as these folks, that they were actually older in terms of the wear and tear and the stress on their bodies at that time.
But it's also that we attach a styling to an age as well. So nowadays, when everybody, I don't know, they doing these porn nowadays they're doing these mustaches a certain way. And I think they're probably going to start doing the sideburns and stuff. We attach that to older age because of the time that we came up. So maybe if you compare someone who is styled like that, then you think of them as older because we already saw these, that's what the grown people look like.
Or what about people who died at an age younger than you currently are, but were older than you, right?
Yeah.
So, like say for
Tupac.
instance, Tupac, he died in his 20s. And most of us listening and watching are older, some of us decades older than Tupac was when he died, but he still always somehow feels older in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because that was the relationship we had to them at the time.
Exactly.
So yeah. So I will also say that there is this aspect of like time travel, and I do love an amazing time travel movie, but you could kind of talk about it as time travel in the sense that his body is traveling in the opposite direction as everybody else.
And I think so the clockmaker made that to, I guess, symbolize or to actually
trigger
the
supernaturally
people who are coming back from the war to get back the time that they missed, which makes me think about the movie Click with Adam Sandler and the remote, right? They missed this time, so we need time to go back because of the stuff that was going on in the world and how you just so-called lose those years when you're going off to war.
Well, when you think about the time and it passing, and back to that clockmaker, what happened to him ultimately in there was that his son goes off to war and dies, and that he wants to rewind the clock. And this is such a relatable feeling when you have such a tremendous loss. And people who have analyzed and looking at the loss of a child and that, many folks will say that that's even harder than the loss of like a parent or somebody else in your life. And while I don't like trying to put head to head, this is a harder loss, and this is, I would say there's an aspect of it where it's such an unnatural thing. People expect that you're going to kind of go in this chronological order in the same fashion that you came into the world. So, your parents are older, your grandparents are even older. You expect your grandparents to go first and then your parents. And when something happens where somebody is taken out in a time frame that doesn't coincide with the expectation, that just upsets your reality.
Right. But see, the thing too is that the same thing was going to happen to the clockmakers per child or to everyone, right?
Eventually.
That eventually is going to come and get us.
Yes.
So it makes it very symmetrical in the I guess the disintegration of the body and the mind too is just the natural course of things.
Well, and then I go back to Daisy and her willingness to take care of them. Like, I just feel like when you love a person, you just, no matter how hard it is, I just feel like there's the willingness that's there to just do whatever you can do, because ultimately, and some people will say, oh, this is so selfless, but this might be a nuanced take on it, but I think that there's a part of it that's selfish because you don't want to let that person go. And the way you don't let them go is by trying to prolong, right? And the efforts to prolong would be giving them the care that they can have, that's good care, doing all of the things that you can do to try to keep them around longer. and make them last longer. And on some level that's selfish. And I think that the hard part is that we all, are forced to make those types of decisions. That's part of the life decision, the quantity versus quality, how much, who should be deciding, back to the couple who chose to terminate, whose decision is it? What happens with somebody else's life? And these are all just kind of very questions of concept, as opposed to, that we have definitive answers. I mean, I can have how I feel in any given moment, but what I'll say is that through life, as I've matured, I've realized that, answers that were very definitive earlier in life, this is right, this is wrong, there are no gray areas, as I've gotten older, there's become the experiences I've had in life have made more of these areas gray.
But it seems like when it comes to the social timeline, that's not the case.
Right. It's become more black and white.
Yeah. It's that anytime somebody have given advice or is a so-called coach or whatever, they say, if they do this, if everybody has heart at your post and one person likes it, the person that likes it is a hater. You know what I'm saying? Everything is like that. If you text and they don't answer back in 30 minutes, then they're cheating. Everything is this hyperbolic, black and white binary thing that always sounds good because maybe that's just a primitive brain. Everything just sounds good, and then people accept it because it sounds good. And they're also affirming in that I am special, the world is hating on me. You know what I'm saying? Or something that strokes at the ego.
If you have ever watched one of our deep dives and thought you should cover this movie next, Deep Dive on Demand is for you, just like your boy Brian did with this video. With the sole executive producer credit, you can choose any movie you like for just a $75 contribution. You'll be the sole executive producer on that video. You're going to receive on-screen credit, and you're going to get a shout out during the video. Looking for a lower cost option though? Co-executive producer credits start at just $10. Simply choose a film from our select list and you'll receive on-screen credit and a shout out alongside the other co-executive producers for that video. We also have a couple of limited time bundles available. You can get 3 co-executive producer credits for $25, which is a $30 value, or our biggest bundle yet, 1 sole executive producer credit for the movie of your choice, plus 3 co-executive producer credits for just $75. That's a $105 value. You cannot beat it. So it's a great way to support the channel while you help us decide what movies to cover next. You'll find links to all of these options in the description below. Well, there's another thing that just kind of occurs to me as I think about Benjamin, because the other thing this film highlights is fear. All of these different fears that we have as we navigate through life, the fear of loss of other people, the fear of burdening ourselves, the fear of letting go, of being vulnerable, and all of that. And what I realized is that when Benjamin left Daisy, that wasn't the first time he left. Benjamin left Queenie once she had her baby. You see, when Benjamin was the only child, he was there. But then once he came of age, and that coincided with the time when she finally gets pregnant and has a baby, he leaves. And I'm like, okay, is there a dynamic where Benjamin is leaving once there's somebody else there that can compete for the love? Like he has to have it all for himself. Is that a thing?
But see, that's the thing. Kids always leave, right? People always
should,
and especially back in the day, men left to go do things for their families, and also like Cheri likes Little House on the Prairie, and what's his name, Michael, or that's the actor?
The actor is Michael Landon.
So they're both not Michael.
Pa.
Yeah. He was always leaving, going off and doing something.
Charles. What was the name? Ingalls. Charles Ingalls.
Yeah, and then in one of our favorite Roots, they're going off and leaving and coming
Chicken
back.
George left and went all overseas.
The wife who's like, no, you don't stay here just because you want to be here with family because my man free, to paraphrase, right?
In Roots,
so
Tildy.
Yeah, it always happens that your kids are going to leave, right? And then other people from time to time, they just have to go because
Well, what I wonder is how Queenie would have responded to him leaving if he was going to leave and she didn't have a baby. Because I don't know. Like I through life, I've encountered these situations where for whatever reason, and especially mothers, but sometimes fathers, don't want to let the kid go. Don't want to let the kid go into the world and become who they need to be as a person. Because I don't think there's really a way for you to do that without at some point kind of stepping out into the world. And like you said, it just it's a very natural thing to at least temporarily leave. Oh, I'm going away to college, or I'm going to go away to the military and I come home. I'm going to,
I'm just leaving because I'm an adult now.
Yeah. And even if it's leaving symbolically, like I'm going to move into my own house, you back to roots since you brought that up. Once Kunta Kinte became a man, he had his own hut.
Yeah.
He got his own hut. So he wasn't in there with his mama and daddy. And I just think that is a very natural thing to have happen, even if it's just that, hey, I'm still in the village, but I got my own hut now. Like, but the decision, and I don't know that it's conscious on the part of a lot of mothers, but I've seen it up close and personal to the point that it's just so smothering to the children. And as much as they feel like it's loving them, giving them everything they need, it's actually taking away from the experiences that these children can have, which is a very sad thing. But I don't think that the mothers can see it, and fathers who do it too. But I don't think they can see it. I think they're too close. I think they can just only think, I want to protect this little being. This is my person. But one of the other things it robs the child of is self-determination.
Yeah.
Right.
But see, that's another thing. So you have the parents who they have this bond with this kid and their kids and just want to keep them there forever. But then the kids always want to leave.
Always.
I don't know what kid just want to be like, I'm going to stay with my parents forever. No, you want to get out. You want to have your own life. You want what you think is freedom and whatnot, right? Until you have the kid and then you do the same thing. But it's still kind of like Cats in the Cradle. This is probably the second time I brought this
bringing
song
that
up.
song Cats in the Cradle up. Yeah.
So, the kids want to leave. The parents don't. But then somewhere later on, I think there is this want from the kid to go back.
Yes.
To how it was before, to not be away.
Yeah. And I guess that cycle is one where you feel like it's healthy.
And maybe that's why it's not symmetrical necessarily with Benjamin Button, because he wanted the separation, it seemed like, in the end.
Well, I think it's very complex because I also think back, you said, wrapped up into the pride, wrapped up into not wanting to be the burden. I think that people voice, I don't want to be a burden on you. But what's underneath that a lot of times, yes, I think it's true that they don't want to make the lives of people whom they love hard. But I think the bigger thing is their pride.
That's
they
a
don't
good
want
excuse.
It's an amazing excuse. It's an amazing excuse, but it is not rooted in reality. The reality is that you don't want somebody who's always seen you as a strong person to have to change your diapers maybe, or to see you in a vulnerable, weakened state. And I'll have to say, from the part of being like the younger family member who was a child, and you see your, grandparents and parents and uncles and aunts and so on who have aged and passed, many of whom have passed on. For me, one of the hardest things is to remember how it was when they were young. I look at the youngins in the families now where, these are kids who never knew they were, like we think about it, if you're born, chances are that your grandparent always seemed old. Right?
Yeah.
They were, were they ever young in your mind as a young person, right? You never knew them young. But when you have spent a significant amount of your life and you knew these people, even though they weren't children, they were in their 20s. They were young and vibrant and virile and had lots of energy to give you plenty of spankings and whoopings and keep you in line as aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents, whatever. And then you see them slowly decline, like happens to all of us. That, for me, is the hardest mental part of it, is being able to deal with that part of it, just to see it and understand it, because it's hitting home the reality that I think a lot of us just would rather ignore. I know I would not. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about people I love not being around. And
I kind of
yeah.
noticed that when I'm getting older, like if it's somebody I know now that we have social media who I haven't seen in a long time, right? And then I see, I'm like, dang, I'm old.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, man, you look old. You know what I'm saying? But certain people who you've always seen along the way, you don't necessarily see them in that same kind of oldness way because your image has evolved along with their age.
Yeah. And I think maybe that on some level happens with siblings. I think about that with my siblings. I think about that with like my cousin groups, right? And I'm like, man, we done got old people got kids. None of and one of my cousins has grandkids. But other than that, yeah, I think only one has grandkids. But like it's like when did this happen? I remember us being kids wearing our onesies at Christmas time, all sleeping in like the same let out couch for the holidays as, you know, when the families all get together. And now, you know, we're scattered to the wind.
Right. And with Benjamin Button, it was the hope. Well, it's that, you know, that he's aging in reverse, I think, at some point, right? You know, he's going to get better. You have that. And when someone is born, you think he's going to pass away, right? Because he's old. But then you got the hope that he's going to get better. You don't really necessarily have that when someone is a child. So eventually it's going to turn into that, okay, now they get better. Now you know that it's still downhill from here, right? So it's kind of tilting that whole process on its side.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when you just have a regular kid, quote, regular kid, then, they're just, you don't have this hope that they would get better in a sense.
Yeah.
And by regular, I meant the aging in
normal fashion.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Whereas,
not about some other conditions. Yeah.
But like for Queenie, I think that, you know, people have hoped against hope that, you know, especially like if the child has some sort of childhood illness or whatever, that like they can kind of overcome it even against the odds. And occasionally it does actually happen. But it's just, you know, it's.
But I guess it could have been touch and go because if you have all those ailments as an older person, then something of that nature could be something that causes his death, right? Just because he's aging backwards doesn't mean that he won't succumb to some condition that his older self had.
Right. I mean, because he could have had an accident. You know, there are so many things that interrupt life, especially back then. Like the more things could have happened to you back then, you know, a trolley car could not, you know, could have knocked you out and you'd be done for, you know, early. So many things happen, you know, but there's another concept I feel like this film puts in our face, which is the love you choose versus the love you inherit. You know, Benjamin chose to love Daisy. He chose to love her. Versus the inherited love of, you know, like his mama, who ultimately was Queenie, right? You're born into that. You just naturally, I think it's just going to be very natural, no matter what, that you're going to love your primary caregiver, the one that's been there your whole life. The time is going to create that love, no matter what, which is different than just the choice to love a person and to be able to still be dedicated to them just as much as, maybe even more so, than he was dedicated to Queenie. You know, but I wonder what it would have looked like if Benjamin had just stayed. You know, Daisy would have never married the guy and he could have had whatever time he was going to have with her. And that's kind of how I feel. But you know what else it makes me think of too is people who choose to have children older. Because with technology now today, you know, over time, people, and this is proven by the fact that you could look in, you know, when people had children throughout the years, and in some people's trees, you know, there are people whose peak fertility comes later and so on and so forth. There have always been women who've had children well into their 40s, right? But now you got people who having kids well into their 50s. And what does that mean because of life expectancy and all of these other things? And is it wrong? I happen to come across this page where a woman she had a child at 54 and there were all sorts of nasty comments on the video. And they were like, well, why would you have a child? Now, her child was assisted. She had the baby IVF. She had like a set of twins or whatever with IVF. And it was her own eggs. I was like, okay. But there were people in the comments just being so nasty to her. And this woman had tried to have a baby for like 25 years. She had tried for 25 years and, you know, whatever. And she was able to have these twins this way. And, you know, she's more looking like, hey, she could be their grandparent rather than their parents. But the judgment that was there, and I was like, yeah, how do you answer that judgment? It's interesting that the woman came on and she said, you know, you judge my life, but these children are well loved and we will have the time that we have. And, you know, that was her philosophy. Yeah, she said, but who are you to say what should happen with my children in my life?
Yeah, or her own life. Yeah. But is the feeling any different if you lose a parent at 50 versus 20?
What do you mean? Like, oh,
because that's what their issue is, that, you're going to die and your kid ain't going to have a parent. But is it any different if it happens at 50?
I think no matter what, the loss of a parent is always just, it's a nightmare. It's something you just never want to see happen. Yeah. And how about this? The only way it doesn't happen is if you go first.
Exactly.
Which is like saying that you would put that on your parent. You know what I mean? Yeah, like there's just no way out of it. There's no way out of it. You know, and it's and having had these experiences myself, you know, because I you know, have lost my dad. I think about something that he said to me, and I was probably in my mid-30s when he said this. He was like, you know, you're entering the hard part of life. And I'm smiling thinking, oh, you know, I'm all just like, what do you mean the hard part of life, Daddy? You always say, you know. And boy, fast forward, you know, more than a decade, and the experiences that I've had in the last maybe 12 to 15 years, I realize, oh, he was right. Oh, he was so right. Because you think as a younger person that this is the hard part. And I mean typical things. I'm not talking atypical, because some people's lives, you know, have just horrendous things happen early in life. But I'm saying if you got the typical trajectory where you have a reasonable childhood and you go into young adulthood, you find yourself, and then maybe you have some kids and whatever, then, you know, but the tough questions, the tough stuff, man, it's like, can you get that reverse aging? Like if it could just get better as you got older, but it does, like you're physically breaking down in some ways. You can't do what we're doing at 20. And then, especially when you hit middle age, you have children that you're trying to deal with. And then you also have aging parents. Like you're sandwiched in between all of these responsibilities. When you're young, usually you just got maybe yourself to take care of, or maybe you and kids, but your parents might still be young enough. And then, you know, once you get over that hump and you're yourself older, well, your parents are likely already gone. And then maybe, hopefully there's somebody who can help you if you need help. But, you know, it's different. But yeah, he was like, yeah, you get into the hard part of life. And I had no clue. But see, by this point, because my parents were both 20 years older than me, roughly. And so, you know, you're 20 years down the line, they could tell you what they see. And boy, you know, it's not a day that goes by that I don't think about like the gems that my dad was dropping, that I'm so glad he dropped, but that I at the time just, you know, like I had no clue. I was totally clueless. Like, what you talking about? Oh, Daddy, just be more optimistic. You know, like you want to dismiss it. And the older people in your life would be telling you things that's, you know, good knowledge for the future. And luckily, we tend to hopefully remember, you know, I tend to remember a lot of the conversations. And oddly enough, you know, after he passed, I remembered even more. Like, I don't know. I think you, in the process of memorializing that person in your mind, you just try to replay all of the things because you don't have new memories. So, yeah. But this film is definitely, let me tell you, I feel like I never saw this movie. You know, when it came out, I wanted to see it. And then I for whatever reason, I just never watched it. I'm sure that at the time, maybe I rented it and intended to watch it, and I just never had seen this movie.
My memory was much more favorable than
the actual movie.
I thought it was much better than I see it now.
So I think that if we look at some of the questions we had, like Benjamin, we both agree that we don't think he made the right decision to leave. Yeah. And I just think he should have just stayed. You just should have stayed, and you get whatever time you get, and none of us know what that's really going to be. But that's it. But time can be wonderful, and time can be cruel at the same time. And this movie really just highlights just how fragile life is, how temporary life is. Because that's another thing. The older I get, the faster time seems to be flying by. It seemed like it took forever for me just to be 10 years old.
Bro, we just talked about this.
Yeah. We are like on fast
of your
speed.
life. That's your perspective.
We are fast forwarding through life at this point. By the time you hit middle age, it's like, dag, another year passed.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up and the day is over. But yeah, I really want to thank your boy Brian for having us take a look at this movie. My first look, your at least second look at the film, and really analyze it. It was a good movie. And you guys know I love the movies that make me kind of contemplate and think about stuff. And this certainly was one of those thought-provoking films for me. So thank you so much for the choice to become an executive producer of this video.
If you made it this far, type move forward in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now. And also be sure to visit axiom.app, where you'll find all of our recent videos across all of our channels in one place with links to them back on YouTube so you can watch them here.